Hello, today I will analyze my games from the 2021 Chess.com Daily Chess Championship, Round 2. Even though it might seem easy at first, Round 2 was actually quite a challenge. I managed to get 17.5 out of 20 points, which was enough for the first place. However, I wasn't sure that I was going to advance until the very end. The challenge in my group was actually not some titled players or some strong federated players that I would know of, but a lot of new players who seem to join Chess.com recently. They started with ratings like 1400 or 1600. However, they seem to have a very high win rate, and they seem to be playing much stronger than their ratings. So I'll start with the games against the second place in the group, Leo 2718. As we can see from this player, he started with a 1623 rating, and in fact in round 1 he was 1200. However, if we look at his stats, he actually has over 90% win rate in daily chess, and he's definitely underrated. So let's start with the first game. This game with white I managed to win, and in fact I won very quickly, and I wasn't even expecting that this player would take second place in my group. What's very interesting about this player as well is that, as you can see, he took 22 or 23 hours on basically every single move. And it was a case for 3 or 4 players in my group, and I think it was kind of a tactic. So basically by playing very slow, you're hoping that your opponents might time out at some point. So I started with e4, c5, knight f3, knight d6, the standard knight of defense. Also here, I think I'll be following my own analysis, so I don't want to turn on the computer analysis on and show the best moves, evaluations and percentages. I just want to share my own thoughts about the game. So I started with f3. This is a variation I actually don't really play anymore. However, I was playing against a low-rated opponent, and I felt that I just want to attack and win easily, since, as I mentioned, this player was 1600 at the beginning. e6, bishop e3, knight bd7, queen d2, b5, g4, h6. I think this is still theory, as we can see here. Castle, h4. And also knight e5. Here it seems that the main move is b4, but I think that after b4, knight e4, queen a5, b3. There's some very, very long lines, and I don't really know the evaluation right there. However, I've seen some games with it, and I think it's playable for both sides. Something like that. White has a pawn advantage, however, black has the compensation because of white's weak king right here. However, my opponent opted for knight e5, which basically takes us out of theory after rook g1, bishop e7, and we only have 2 games right here. g5, h takes g5, the natural continuation, h takes g5, knight h5. And here I felt that even though actually following the explorer, white has this disadvantage because black won the last 2 games which were played in this position. I felt that white should be better because black didn't manage to castle yet, and I don't think he's going to castle in any of the sides. So I followed up with g6. The idea is to use my advantage of development and just try to make a quick attack on black king. Knight takes g6 seems like an obvious move. If f takes g6, knight e6, you should be winning. And another option, something like b4. I also feel that black's king isn't that strong on f7. So he played knight takes g6, knight takes e6, which is forced, I think. F takes e6, rook takes g6, king f7. And here I go back rook to g1. So my opponent is playing all the natural moves here, b4, knight e2, d5, which I felt had to be a mistake, because right now opening the center with black's king on f7 shouldn't be a good idea. I would be more afraid of a move like queen a5, maybe rook c8, something like that, and black should probably leave it up to me to decide how to attack his king and how to win the game. With d5, he opens it up for me. So of course I won't be taking, because after queen takes d5, a2 is hanging, and I'm pretty much forced to go to an endgame, which I don't want. So I played knight d4, which is a pawn sacrifice. However, I didn't really feel like it's a sacrifice. With black took on e4, f takes e4, bishop takes e4, bishop c4, and here I actually thought that I'm winning. With black's weak pawn on e6, with his open king on f7 and very uncoordinated pieces like knight on h5, and my position looks pretty good. So he played the only defense to the e6 pawn, bishop d5, and here I actually took a couple of minutes to go through my options, which I don't usually do since I usually blitz through my daily games, and I found the follow-up. Knight takes e6, bishop takes e6. Here, if king takes e6, then taking on d5 wins. There's basically no other option than bishop takes e6. Bishop takes e6, queen f2 check. Bishop f6 check. Bishop 6 if it's forced. Bishop takes e6, king takes e6, rook takes d8. So I won the queen for knight and rook, but black's problems don't end here, since after rook hd8, queen f3, he's still uncoordinated. He cannot defend the knight on h5, other than by playing h8, and here I follow up with queen e4 check, king f7 which is forced, queen d5 check, and black king is running out of free spots. King e7, bishop c5, black resigned. And while it seems like an easy game against a lower-rated opponent, it actually turns out that possibly it was one of the games which helped and allowed me to take first place in my group. Since, as I will show right now, I actually managed to lose and get completely outplayed in the second game against this player. So the game started with d4, d5, the standard Slav defense. I think we followed the book for a couple of moves here. Bishop b4 I think is the main move. Knight d7, castle, queen e7, knight e5. I think what usually white plays here is something like queen c2 or queen e2, maybe, and then going for e4. However, we played knight e5. Took, knight d7, f4. Here, I think I was kind of scared of some bishop h7 tactics. I don't know if it works, but something like that here. I wasn't really willing to risk this kind of a sacrifice at the beginning, especially that I was going to, well, in theory, play a lower-rated opponent that I should outplay in a positional game. So I played f5. C takes d5, c takes d5, g4. He's quite aggressive here, but it makes sense since I haven't really finished my development yet. F takes g4, queen takes g4, knight c5. Bishop c2, that's all forced. Queen f7. Here I was thinking about playing bishop takes c3, bishop takes e4, rook a1. However, I feel that I might have problems with finishing my development here. Something like this, bishop 7 and bishop b4. Queen b4, rook d7, black is losing. So I went with queen f7, rook f3, now I took on c3, since he doesn't have a tempo with bishop b4, knight e4, bishop b4, rook e8. Bishop takes d4, rook g3. Here, I think the position should be around equal. However, as it turned out in the future, actually it's not that easy to play this position with black. Bishop d7, a4. He's limiting my options of playing bishop b5, bishop d3. Play rook ac8, h4. Rook c2, rook g2. Rook ec8. See, it kind of seems that the game is heading towards a draw. King h2, rook g2, queen g2, h6. Here, I was not afraid to give up my e4 pawn with queen e4, bishop 6. I think I might be better or winning. However, he didn't fall for that. He went with rook g1. And here I think I made the mistake which actually cost me the game. So I just kind of thoughtlessly played b5, a5. And while it might seem those moves make no difference, actually the weakness of the a6 pawn turned out to be losing at a very, very deep endgame. So if I had to go back, I would probably play bishop c6 here, and I think the game would end with a draw if I did. However, I played a5, bishop c6, b4. The problem is here that I have no way of breaking through with my rook to his side, since he will always block with the bishop. So I'm kind of just left waiting. King h7, queen g4. Rook c7, h5. Maybe I should have actually went h5 here, just trying to make a fork just here and draw, but I wasn't aware of the problems I was going to face. Rook c7, h5, king h8, rook f1. He's trying to break through with f5. Bishop c4, rook f2, rook c8, f5. He takes f5, rook takes f5, queen d5. Here I was thinking maybe about bishop e6, but then rook f7, bishop takes g4, maybe something like rook a7. It also seems kind of unpleasant for black. So I went with queen d5, hoping he might maybe give me some chances with counterplay with queen d2 check. However, he just went bishop d4. Now e6 is a threat, and I have to go back. Queen e6, queen g6, queen takes g6, and I think that was a mistake. I probably should have just played king g8. I was maybe scared of some rook f6 move, but I think after queen e7, I think I'm fine. He cannot really take because queen h4 check, king e2, and maybe I have something like bishop f1. I would have to calculate here, but I think black is actually winning here. However, during the game, I wasn't really aware of the consequences of queen takes g4. I just thought it's going to be a draw with opposite colored bishops. However, h takes g6, king g8, bishop c5. I can move my rook to c6 now. I have to go back bishop e6, rook f4, e8, and actually he just goes king g3. And here, surprisingly, he has a winning plan, walking the king here, bishop here, and walking the king all the way to b6 to a6. And it seems that due to my back rank weakness, the pawn on g6, I have no way of defending against that. I play bishop d5, king f2, bishop e6. If he takes on e4, bishop f5 is fine. However, he just keeps walking the king. And at some point, I just have to give up my h-pawn to do anything. So I played h5, king d2, h4. Just my only options. Even if I played bishop g4 here, I have no follow-up. I can't move my rook or do anything. I can just go king c3. I played h4, rook takes h4, bishop f5, king c3, rook takes e5. I got rid of the e5 pawn, however the king is walking through to a6. e8, king d5. Here I played bishop g6 because I finally managed to eliminate the pawn. However, rook f4, it's a very strong move. He doesn't allow me to go back with the bishop, something like that, to defend. Rook f4, I have to go bishop f7 check, king d6. King d6 actually a very strong move because I'm kind of in a zugzwang. If he played king c6, I can probably play rook e6 check as well. Or maybe even something like bishop e6, king e6, bishop c8. However, after king d6, I can play bishop e6 because rook takes on e4. And at this point I realize that I'm just dead lost. Played rook e6, king c7, g5, which is my only chance. However, this pawn is not going anywhere. Rook g4, rook e5. Because here rook g6 runs into bishop e7. Rook e5, king b7, bishop e6, and I'm losing both of my pawns on the queen side. g4, king takes a6. This position is very easily winning for white. King takes b5, a7, and the b pawn just goes through. Here I reside. And what's interesting about this game is that, first of all, my opponent played pretty much perfectly. I cannot really find anything else than maybe some small inaccuracies on his side. And it seems like a very small mistake, such as playing b5 here, so just playing bishop c6, which was a move which I played probably blitzing somewhere, waiting somewhere, spending like 2 seconds on the move, ended up costing me the game. In the next part of the video, I will talk about my games against the second seed in my group, so MIG 2020. Looking at my opponent's profile, I was actually much less scared of him than the other people with new accounts, as he has an account since 2016 with a well-established rating with 1,000 games. And by winning both of the games with white and black against the second seed, of course, I managed to get much closer to advancing to the next round. So let's take a look at those games. In the first game, we started the French defense. Knight d2 c5 variation. This variation is well known as a very drawish, equalish opening. Black usually plays it in order to be safe and hopefully make a draw, with less winning chances but with very solid position. Takes d5. This is all theory. I will go knight b3 and take back the pawn on d4. Takes. Hundreds of games have been played in this line, so I won't analyze it deeply. Bishop b3, bishop d6, h3, e5. Of course, black equalized here. He doesn't have any problems out of the opening. Knight c2, bishop d7, bishop d5, bishop c6. Knight e4, bishop e3, knight f6. Here, I don't really like the knight f6 move. I think there was no need to go back with the knight, which was doing pretty well on e4. I would have played something like rook a d8. Okay, d1, rook f e8, bishop g5. Of course, I don't want to repeat with bishop e3, knight f6. So I went to c1. Now bishop d5, rook d5, f6. Here, I was beginning to see my chance, which would be the weak white squares from black, after exchanging the bishop and playing f6, leaving a gap on f5, maybe 6. Rook d1, rook d8, knight e3, queen c4. Now it's some pretty much forced exchanges. Knight e6, queen b3. I don't want to exchange queens yet, since queen c7, knight c7, rook e7, rook e7. There's nothing special for white there. Queen f7, knight f5, rook d8. I was hoping to force some tactics with knight f5, but there's nothing. Rook takes d8 is forced. Knight takes d8, queen d1, knight c6, b3, knight e7. I don't like knight e7 from black. I would have played something like g6, hoping to exchange maybe the bishop for the knight. Instead, after knight e7, I'm left with the better bishop. He has a bad bishop here with all those pawns. Of course, this position still should be a draw, but I already have some winning chances. And of course, I'm very safe and I can't lose here. d5, queen d8. I don't want to exchange queens yet. Bishop e3. Still, I'm hoping to just make some problems for my opponent, maybe provoke some more weaknesses. Bishop d6, queen h8. Now bishop a6 the threat has to go back, g4. So I'm fixing the pawn structure here, and I can already see that if I can put my king on e4 and exchange the queens, I should probably be winning here. Queen e7. Queen e4, my opponent is just standing still, which is probably a bad idea. He probably should have tried something more active, maybe somehow play g6, f5, maybe b5, something like that. King e7, h4, I'm planning to play h5 to fix a weakness on g7. King e6, h5. Here my opponent took, and I think that's already a losing mistake, since after king e4, this position, even though it looks like a draw, it's actually winning for white. Since what I will do is I will just push the pawns here, I'll play b5, c5, c6, and I will use this pawn to distract the black king and win the pawns on the king side, which is exactly what followed in the game. c5, b4, a4, b5. Some moves to improve my position, f3, bishop c5, now bishop f8, king f7 is forced, bishop d6. King e6 is the only move, c7, king, and actually black resigned here, because after king d7, king f5, takes, white is completely winning. Now I will go to the black game. Here I chose the Alliance defense, which is one of the, I would say, sharper openings with black if I want to play for a win. Knight d5, d6, bishop g4, c6, which is one of the lines, c4, knight b6, knight g5. Actually, I wasn't happy to see this line because it's much more dangerous for black than the usual passive castle, h3, bishop f3, d takes e5 line, bishop e2, h6, that's theory, e6. Here I'm completing my development, trying to also attack the e5 pawn, castle, rook ad1, rook ad8, bishop g3. And I think white got a solid advantage from the opening, mostly because I have less space here. And I think that's not because I made some mistake, but just because this line doesn't fully equalize. Played king h8 to get out of any knight f6 check tactics. b3, knight c8, defending the d6 square. White played knight d6, which I don't think is necessary. I think white can wait, maybe play something like rook d2, rook fd1. Knight d6, bishop takes d6, e takes d6, queen a5, queen b2. I don't want to have my queen get stuck on the queen side after some b4 c5 or c5 from my side, so I went queen h5, rook d4, f6. Now my plan is to play e5 and close the white bishop on g3, and I think if I manage to play e5, close the bishop on g3 and as well as knight on f3, I think I should be okay here. Here white played b4, hoping to play c5 and defend his pawn on d6. However, I just played c5, rook h4, queen g6, rook d1, e5, a3, which is I think a move which doesn't really do anything here. Knight cb6, I want to attack c4 at some point. Knight e1, queen f7, knight d3. Here if I take on c4, queen attacks and he will take on c5, so I just played rook c8. He took on c5, and now he played a move which really surprised me because he played knight takes e5, which is kind of desperation because he's not losing yet. He can play knight takes c5 or knight b4 maybe, and I think I'm better, but I'm not winning yet. And after knight e5, bishop e5, king h7, there's actually nothing for white here. Played queen c2 check, queen f5, and I'm attacking e5 and f2, and white cannot do anything. He exchanged queens, bishop g3, knight c7, and he actually resigned here because I'm picking up all the pawns, and I'll be left with a piece up. Since going over all of those 18 actually games, so I don't count the timeouts, so it would probably take like 2 or 3 hours. I want to stop going over specific games and just give a few interesting mentions or tactics or ideas that have appeared. Also a few tips that come from my wins and some conclusions from my losses. So first of all, let's look at number 10. So the player who finished in the last place except the timeouters. Here, I actually managed to win a game in 5 moves, which was very interesting. Actually, it's 4 moves. d4, knight f6, bishop f4, c5, knight f3, c takes d4, and here my opponent played knight takes d4, and e5. And after e5, white resigned. Since bishop e5, queen a5 wins the bishop. I think it's from all the games I ever played in my life, this is like the fastest win ever in an actual game. And I feel sorry for my opponent since he kind of lost the chance to play an interesting game. I also want to show how easy it is actually to lose a game here against someone who is rated 1500 in theory. However, as it's correspondence chess, people can use as much time as they want. They can also use opening books and everything. Some people play much stronger than their rating might tell. And I'll show one of those games here. My opponent was rated 1522, as you can see. However, he played a pretty much perfect game. We went with the Sicilian defense, the b3 line, which is not supposed to be very dangerous for black. I played what seemed normal to me. Bishop e7, bishop takes c6, bishop e7, and here I castled, which is probably already like practically a losing mistake. I should have gone something like queen c7, b5, maybe even castle long, or just keep my king in the center. However, after castle d4, c takes e4, knight takes d4, white actually gets a much better version of the Sicilian defense. Like, for example, comparing it to the line where white takes queen takes d4 and move 4. This is a much better version in a similar structure, since the bishop on b2 will be very strong in white's attack, and white can simply walk the pawns with g4, g5, h4, h5, and black has no defense against all the threats. I played what seemed like normal moves, and here I'm just completely lost after g6. Of course, I tried my best, however my opponent didn't make any mistakes. He followed up with the attack. The material is equal and I'm just defending, and I can defend against everything. This position is lost. White didn't actually play the most accurately here. He kind of let it out for a bit. However, there was never a moment where I could fully equalize or get back in the game. I'm all pinned up, even though maybe I'm a pawn up, there's just no way I can defend everything. Here after queen h4, with all the queen h7 threats, I'm just forced to give up the queen for the rook. And my opponent here also showed very good technique, and even though it seemed like the pawn goes to g2 and I have some drawing chances, in fact this position is lost and my opponent played perfectly. And after some checks, I will lose my rook at some point. And I lost. And what I can say, I made one mistake in the opening by not realizing how dangerous it is to castle kingside, and I ended up losing to a 1500 player. On the other hand, I used some of my opponent's mistakes, and I got some lucky wins in this tournament that I didn't deserve, and I will show a few of them here. For example, in this game against Motsos, who was the first seed in this tournament, I will jump over the opening, and I'll just show one moment. Here I blitzed through and I played b4, which of course right after playing I realized how bad of a move it was and what a mistake I made. And I was very lucky that my opponent didn't see that after knight takes d4. In fact, black is winning. Straight away. I cannot take on d4 because rook takes c3. My only possible move is rook takes c7, knight takes c2, takes, and king takes d7, and black is winning. So I could have lost this game in one move because of one move which I blitzed, which I played on the go on my phone somewhere, and I was very lucky that my opponent didn't use this mistake. I will also show one game where it will become visible how important it is to be careful and know endgames well. It's a game against Lincoln, right here, where I was slightly better for most of the game, however he defended well, and we got into what was pretty much a completely drawn rook endgame right here. So coming back, white is running with the pawns on the king side. I'm trying to run with my a pawn. Here white played h6. I played king f7 because if I play a2, h7, I queen, rook check, king f7, here, queen, h1, king g5, queen c1, king h5. And there's no way I can win here. I can just make a perpetual check here. So I didn't go for the first line. I played king f7, hoping my opponent will make some mistake. Here he played rook e8, which is an inaccuracy. He should have just played rook c8 or rook b8. Now, a2, h7 is exactly the same line that we saw before, so I would play king g6. Now rook c6 check, king h7, king h5. If I play a2, he can just keep checking me here. I'll go rook a8, rook c7 check, king h8, king g6. And now if I play a2, rook h7, king g8, rook h7, and this is a draw since I have to go back here. So this was a very simple draw. Instead my opponent played rook a8, I played rook a6, setting up a trap, because if white plays h7 here, I am forced to play rook h6, king g5, rook h7, rook a8, and this is the draw. I can play rook a3, but king f5, and there's no way I can win this position. It's just taking my e5 pawn. He can keep checking me or walk with the king to a3. The game ends with a draw. Instead, he played king h5, which is a losing mistake because of the tactics. Rook takes h6, king takes h6, king e8, and white simply had to resign because black is first. So, to be honest, I feel that some of those lucky wins, including also some timeouts for my opponents, which were usually playing very, very slow, taking 22 or 23 hours per every move, but then they also timed out some games, so maybe it wasn't the best strategy. It allowed me to qualify to round 3, where I will definitely face some title players and players who are stronger than me. So thank you very much for listening to this game analysis, and I hope that at least for some players listening to my thoughts about the games was somehow useful and gave them some ideas on how to improve. Thank you very much.